Hey, wow, that was weird. So I had to change browsers and go with my Brave one to get this working. Usually it's the other way around, right? To use Google. Anyways, welcome back to Adult Brain Experimental Live Read. We are working on Ancient America in Notes on American Archaeology by John D. Baldwin. It's from 1871, and we've been through a couple of the chapters: Ancient America, the Mound Builders, the antiquity of the mound builders, who were they? And now we are on chapter 4, Mexico and Central America. And then I'll probably do part of chapter 5, which is continuation of Mexico and Central America. So this is just like the actual way we this is how the sausage is made. We are people, not AI. And I will show you how I edit it. And as I read, as I go along, we'll share some there's pictures in this book. So it'll kind of be visual as well. And yeah, I'm gonna edit as I go, so I'm gonna make mistakes with pronunciations and have to check with my assistant, and just plow forward. If you want to see the other chapters in this book, just go back to the live tab on our channel here, and you'll see the other ones there. We did a book also called Ragnarok recently, so I'll share my screen and show you exactly what I do. Not exactly, because I'm using half screens. I would normally do this on like 2 pages of the PDF, probably, depending on the type of PDF, and then a full screen of the editing software, obviously, which would make it a little bit easier to do. So, but this works fine, and we'll just do it here, and we'll go for it for like a half hour, an hour. So, welcome to Adult Brain. So, we'll get right into it here with chapter 4, Mexico and Central America. Chapter 4, Mexico and Central America. Ruins and other vestiges revealing an ancient civilization are found throughout the whole southern section of North America, extending as far north as New Mexico and Arizona. But here the antiquities do not all belong to the same period in the past, nor exhibit. What does that say? I have to spread this out a little bit. I think it says unvarying. Unvarying, I guess. But here, the antiquities do not all belong to the same period in the past, nor exhibit unvarying likeness and unity of civilized life. They are somewhat less homogeneous and do not constantly represent the same degree of civilization. In this region, the monuments suggest successive and varying periods in the civilized condition of the old inhabitants, some of the oldest and most mysterious monuments seeming to indicate the highest development. In the northern part of this region, we find ruins of great buildings similar in plan and arrangement to those still used by the Pueblos, but far superior as monuments of architecture, science, and skill, and much more unlike those farther south than is apparent in the principal structures of the mound builders. They show that the old settlers in the Mississippi Valley did not belong to the Pueblo branch of the Mexican race. Farther south, in the central part of the region specified, development was more advanced. Here, in the last ages of American ancient history, was the seat of the Mexican or Aztec civilization, but the monuments in this part of the country are mostly older than the Aztec period. The most astonishing remains are found still further south in Chiapa, Tabasco, Oaxaca, Oaxaca. I got that one wrong. That's Oaxaca. And Tehuantepec, Tehuan, Tehuan, Tehuantepec, Tehuantepec. The most astonishing. This is gonna be some challenging pronunciations in here. That's okay. We'll get through it. I don't mind this type. The most astonishing remains are found still further south in Chiapa, Tabasco, Oaxaca, Yucatan, Honduras, Tehuantepec, Guatemala, and other parts of Central America. In this southern region, mostly buried in heavy forests, are wonderful ruins of great cities and temples. Man, it's crazy. This is just getting attention nowadays, like 150, 160 years later, and they knew about it back then. Only a small part of modern Mexico is included in the region where these ruins are situated, and most of them probably were not much better understood by the ancient Mexicans than they are by us. Many of those explored in later times were unknown to that people, just as others, more in number, doubtless, than those already described, still remain unvisited and unknown in the great and almost impenetrable forests of the country. The northern remains. The ruins in northern Mexico, including New Mexico and Arizona, consist chiefly, as already stated, of the the remains. Why did it drop so? Having some weird the ruin technical difficulties here. I had a hard time starting it up this morning for some reason. Check, check. And just try and keep this record level up around so that I could use that audio too. The ruins in northern Mexico, including New Mexico and Arizona, consist chiefly, as already stated, of the remains of structures similar in general design and purpose to those of the village Indians, the Pueblos. In the more ancient times, doubtless, as at present, a large proportion of the dwellings and other edifices, like those in the Mississippi Valley, were built of perishable materials which have left no trace. Many of them, however, were built of stone and have left ruins which show their character. Stone ruins are common in this northern region, although wood and adobe seems to have been more commonly used as building material. Some of the ruined stone ev- Some of the ruined stone edifices were inhabited when the country was conquered by the Spaniards. Some of the ruined stone edifices were inhabited when the country was conquered by the Spaniards. The remains present everywhere the same characteristics. They represent a people who built always in the same way, with some variations in the forms of their structures, and had substantially the same condition of life. But the ruins are not all of the same age. Their character can be sufficiently shown by describing a few of them. In New Mexico, west of the Rio Grande, between the headwaters of the San Jose and Zuni rivers, a bluff or ridge rises in a valley 200 feet high. The Spaniards named it El Morro. On one side of this bluff is vertical. Excuse me. On one Scroll up a bit. One side of this One side of this bluff is vertical and shows yellowish white sandstone rock, on the face of which are inscriptions, Spanish inscriptions and Indian hieroglyphics. It was carefully described in 1849 by Lieutenant Simpson and was explored again 4 or 5 years later by Lieutenant A.W. Whipple, who described it in his report to the government, published in the third volume of Explorations and Surveys for a Railroad Route to the Pacific. On the summit of this height, which Lieutenant Simpson's named Inscription Rock, are the ruins of an extensive Pueblo edifice built of stone. Excuse me, I'm struggling today. The walls were built with considerable skill. In some places, they are still perfect to the height of 6 or 8 feet, vertical, straight, and smooth, and the masonry is well executed, the stones being of uniform size, about 14 inches long and 6 wide. The layers are horizontal, each successive layer breaking joints with that below it. Remains of cedar beams were discovered, and also obsidian arrowheads, painted pottery, and other relics. Another ruin was seen on a height across the gorge. It was found to be similar to this, both in character and condition of decay. Lieutenant Whipple went westward along the 35th parallel. We cannot do better than follow the report of what he saw. His next stopping place after leaving El Morro was in the beautiful valley of Oyo Pescado. Here, close by a spring that showed artificial stonework of ancient date, were two old Pueblo buildings in ruins, so ancient that the traditions of present races do not reach them. I'm just going to check my pronunciation on that Oyo Pescado. Let me check. I think that's what it is, but let me just double check that. Ojo, Ojo, Pescado. Ojo. Should be Ojo, Pescado, Ojo, Oyo. Okay, let me just redo that sentence quickly. Here, close by. Oh, it's even one further back than that. Let me check this one. His next. All right, let's just redo that to be safe. Ojo, Pescado. Ojo. His next stopping place after leaving El Morro was in the beautiful valley of Ojo, Pescado. Ojo? Fuck. Excuse my language. Damn. Sorry. Okay. Let's see here. Where are we at? What he saw. I think it was, I stressed the wrong syllable after all that. Ojo. Ojo. Not Oho. Ojo. Ojo. His next stopping place after leaving El Morro was in the beautiful valley of Ojo Pescado. Here, close by a spring that showed artificial stonework of ancient date, were two old Pueblo buildings in ruins, so ancient that the traditions of present races do not reach them. Not far away is a deserted town of later date. The two ancient structures were circular in form and equal in size, each being about 800 feet in circumference. They were built of stone, but the walls have crumbled and become chiefly heaps of rubbish. The pottery found here, like that at El Morro, is painted with bright color in checks, bands, and wavy stripes. Many fragments show a beautiful polish. A few pieces were discovered larger in size, inferior in color and quality, but indicating a more fanciful taste. I'm just going to stop here and show this ruin, figure 20, Pueblo ruin at Picos. And we'll go on, scroll up, get it ready, check the record level just to make sure. 44 is probably okay if it stays there. United, they form an urn with a curious handle, a frog painted on the outside, and a butterfly within. United. Excuse me. United, they form an urn with a curious handle, a frog painted on the outside, and a butterfly within. In the same neighborhood, on the summit of a cliff 20 feet high, was another old ruin, strongly walled around. In the center was a mound on which were traces of a circular edifice. The next place of encampment was at Zuni, where, as shown in figure 21, can be seen one of these great Pueblo buildings inhabited by 2,000 people, Lieutenant Whipple's estimate. It has 5 stories, the walls of each receding from those below it. Looking from the top, he says it reminded him of a busy anthill, turkeys and tamed eagles constituting a portion of its inhabitants. Not more than a league away is an old Zuni, which shows nothing but ruins. Its crumbling walls, worn away until they are only from 2 to 12 feet high, are crowded together in confused heaps over several acres of ground. This old town became a ruin in ancient times. After remaining long in a ruined condition, it was again rebuilt and again deserted after a considerable period of occupation. It is still easy to distinguish the differences in construction between the two periods. The standing walls rest upon ruins of greater antiquity, and while the primitive masonry is about 6 feet thick, that of the later period is only from a foot to a foot and a half thick. Small blocks of sandstone were used for the latter, heaps of debris over a considerable space in which, among other things, are relics of pottery and of ornaments made of seashells. Pieces of quaintly carved cedar posts were found here, and their condition of decay, compared with that of the cedar beams at El Morro, indicated great antiquity. Quick Quick break for the picture here. Figure 21, modern Zuni. Huh. There's ladders going up each level there, it looks like. Looks like a turkey and a couple birds. Huh. I think I stopped at antiquity. So I'll start at the place of this ruin. Check. The place of this ruin is now one of the consecrated palaces of the village Indians. It has a Zuni altar, which is constantly used and greatly venerated. On leaving the place, their guide blew a white powder toward the altar tree 3 times and muttered a prayer. This, he explained, was asking a blessing of Montezuma and the sun. This altar seems to represent recollections of the ancient sun worship. At a place west of Zuni, ancient relics were found, indicating that an extensive Pueblo town had formerly stood there, but the structures were probably of adobes, as there was no debris of stone walls and only very faint traces of foundations. Near the Colorado Chiquito is a extensive ruin on the summit of an isolated hill of sandstone, the faces of its walls being here and there visible above heaps of debris. It appears to be very old. As near as could be ascertained, the great rectangular Pueblo building was 360 feet in extent on one side and 120 on the other. In some places, the walls are 10 feet thick, with small rooms inserted in them. Stone axes, painted pottery, and other articles are found in the debris. The indented pottery, said to be so very ancient, is found here in many patterns. On a ridge overlooking the valley of Pueblo Creek are traces of an old settlement of large extent, supposed to have been that heard of in 1539 by the friar Marco de Niza as Kingdom of Totonac. Totonac? I better double check that. Pretty sure he's Nisa, but either way, I'm going to have to redo that sentence. So let me just delete it and double check. Supposed to have been. Let's start with beginning of that sentence. On the ridge. And I'll just double check the Marco de Niza, I think it is, and Toteniac. So Toteniac, Totonteac, something like that. Let me just check here. Totonteac, yeah, Totonteac, and Denisa, and Totontenac, Totontenac, Totontenac. Better go back to this screen. Oh, it's not on that screen. Okay, here we go. Denisa, Totontenac. On a ridge overlooking the valley of Pueblo Creek are traces of an old settlement of large extent, supposed to have been that heard of in 1539 by the friar Marco de Niza as the Kingdom of Totontenac. Adobe seems to have been used here for building. Traces of other ruins were seen in various places, and springs along the route showing ancient stonework are mentioned. Ruins are abundant in the Rio Verde Valley down to the confluence of that river. Gotta stop that. Ruins are abundant in the Rio Verde Valley down to the confluence of that river with the Rio Salinas. It is manifest that this whole region was anciently far more populous than it is now. Lieutenant Whipple says large fields in the valley of the Rio Gila. Did I check that one? Rio Salinas, I got that. Gila. Lieutenant Whipple says, let's start it there. Let me go back to there. Gila. Oops. Why is it not doing that? Let's see. Click on that screen. Large fields in the valley of the Rio Gila and many spots along the Pinal Linam. Oh, I should have double checked that first. Penal, Pina, Pina, Pina Leño. Oh, that's why is that Leño? Yeah, Pina Leño, Pina Leño, Pina Leño. Large fields in the valley of the Rio Gila and many spots among the Pino Leño. Leño? Yeah, I had it. Pino, Peñaleño Mountains. Large fields in the valley of the Rio Gila and many spots along the. Oh, this is going to be tough. Breathe. Peñaleño. This is not coming organically to me here. Large fields in the valley of the Rio Gila and many spots among the Peñaleño Mountains. Leño. Peñaleño. Peñaleño. Large fields in the valley of the Rio Gila and many spots among the Peñaleño Mountains are marked with the foundations of adobe houses. Figure 22 represents a pueblo ruined in the valley of the Gila. In Canyon Shei, Canyon Shei, in Canyon Shei. In Canyon. Okay, let's before we redo that, let's just go up and see this picture. So I'm gonna rotate that around so we can see it here. And just spread this guy out. Pueblo ruins in the valley of the Gila. I think this guy sketched these all out by hand. Oh, why does that not fit? That's crazy. That's crazy that this is. Come on, Windows 11, help me out here. Are you really gonna not? How did you not go back to the original? Oh my God, what's going on? Come on, what is happening with this? Why are you not going back to the original setup? What? Okay, let me just fix this. This wasn't quite so complicated last time. Guess I have to just recenter it. Go back to full page. Okay, so Canyon Shei. I'm gonna have to be patient with this. These two chapters, lots of stopping and starting. Sorry about that. Shei, Canyon Shei. Go back to you. Let's see here. Canyon Shei near San Francisco Mountain and upon Rio Verde, there are ruins of more permanent structures of stone, which in their day must have excelled the famed pueblos of New Mexico. There was a higher degree of civilization in the ancient times, so far as relates to architecture and skill in the arts and appliances of life, than has been shown by people of the same race dwelling there in our time. But the ancient condition of life seems to have been maintained from age to age without material change. So interesting to hear them say that back in the mid 1800s. Like this is a trend and a narrative right now about how they were better, more civilized back then. All right, Cevola. How do I pronounce that guy? Cevola. Okay, Cevola. The seven cities of Cevola in the New Mexican valley of the Chaco, 1 degree or more north of Zuni, are ruins of what some suppose to have been the famous seven cities of Cibola. In 1540, Spanish cupidity having been strongly incited by tales of the greatness and vast wealth of Cibola, Coronado, then governor of New Galicia, set out with an army to conquer and rob its cities. The report in which he tells the story of this conquest and of his disappointment is still in existence. The Civolans. 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 The Cevolans defended themselves with arrows and spears and hurled stones upon his army from the tops of their buildings. But resistance was of no avail. Cevola was conquered by Coronado and immediately deserted by all its inhabitants who escaped death. The conquering buccaneer, however, did not find the treasures of gold and silver he expected. 330 years or more have passed away since this expedition of the Spanish marauders, and you have to redo that guy. 330 years or more have passed away since this expedition of the Spanish marauders was undertaken, but the 7 cities of Cevola, if they really were the cities whose remains are found in the Chaco Valley, although much dilapidated, are still sufficiently well preserved to show us what they were. There are 7 ruins in the Chaco Valley, all of the same age, from 1 to 3 miles apart, the whole line along which they are situated being not more than 10 miles in extent. Coronado said of Cevola, "The 7 cities are 7 small towns standing all within 4 leagues together, and altogether they are called Cevola. The Chaco ruins show that each of these cities was Pueblo fashion, a single edifice of vast size, capable of accommodating from 500 to 3,000 people. They were all built of stone around 3 sides of a square, the side opposite the main building being left open. Figure 23 represents one of those buildings restored, according to Lieutenant Simpson. Figure 24 is a ground plan of this structure. The outer faces of the walls were constructed. Let me try that again. The outer faces of the walls were constructed with thin and regular blocks of sandstone. The inner surfaces were made of cobblestone laid in mortar, and the outer walls were 3 feet thick. They were 4 or 5 stories high, and the only entrances to them were window openings in the second story. Above the canyon enclosing the valley containing these ruins, at a distance of 13 miles, are the remains of another city of precisely the same kind. Its walls are at present between 20 and 30 feet high, their foundations being deeply sunk into the earth. Lieutenant Simpson, who explored that region in 1849, says it was built on tabular pieces of hard, fine-grained, compact gray sandstone, none of the layers being more than 3 inches thick. I'm surprised I got that. Okay, well, so here's a couple pictures. Being more than 3 inches thick. So, I mean, do I try that again? It's just annoying on how that didn't go back properly. So let's just see. Now, if I go like this, that's probably better. Then you'd think it would be better just to expand it and contract it back to the same spot. These, maybe if Adobe, would I pay like $25 a month for, would focus on its core competencies instead of giving me all this AI, it might help. All this software seems to be failing. Well, here's the Pueblo building restored. Wow. And here's the plan view, I think. If I rotate that around, the ground plan. So that's looking from above, all these little tiny rooms. It's so weird. Wonder what all those rooms were for. All right. Let me go back to where I was. And why doesn't that just... So I'm going to have to go back to here and recenter this thing. It seems crazy to me. That's where we're at. Okay, so I was at the 3 inches thick. He adds, it discovers in the masonry a combination of science and art which can only be referred to a higher stage of civilization and refinement than is discoverable in the work of Mexicans or Pueblos of the present day. Indeed, so beautifully diminutive diminutive, indeed, Let's redo that quickly. Indeed, so beautifully diminutive and true are the details of the structure as to cause it, at a little distance, to have all the appearance of a magnificent piece of mosaic. Other ruins have been examined in this northern part of the old Mexican territory, and more will be brought to light, for the whole region has not yet been carefully examined, and new discoveries are constantly reported. Central Mexico. As we go down into central Mexico, the remains assume another character and become more important. But the antiquities in this part of the country have not been very completely explored and described, the attention of explorers having been drawn more to the south. Some of them are well known, and it can be seen that to a large extent they are much older than the time of the Aztecs, whom Cortez found in power. In the northern part of the Mexican Valley was the city of Tula, the ancient capital of the Toltecs. At the time of the conquest, its site was an extensive field of ruins. Xochicalco, 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 Xochicalco. Go back to you first, and then click on this, and then I'm back to going. Xochicalco. That Xochicalco in the state of Mexico is a remarkable pyramid with a still more remarkable base. It was constructed with 5 stages or stories and stands on a hill consisting chiefly of rock, which was excavated and hollowed for the construction of galleries and chambers. The opening serves as an entrance to several galleries which are 6 feet high and paved with cement, their sides and ceilings seeming to have been covered with some very durable preparation, which made them smooth and glistening. Captain Dupay found the main gallery 60 yards or 180 feet long, terminating at 2 chambers which are separated only by 2 massive square pillars, carefully fashioned of portions of the rock left for the purpose by the excavators. Over a part of the inner chamber toward one corner is a dome or cupola, 6 feet in diameter at the base and rather more in height. It has a regular slope. It has a regular slope and was faced with square stones, well prepared and admirably laid in cement. From the top went up a tube or circular aperture 9 inches in diameter, which probably reached the open air or some point in the pyramid. In this part of Mexico can be seen, among other things, the Great Pyramid or Mound of Cholula, the very ancient and remarkable pyramidal structures at Teotihuacan, and an uncounted number of teocallis or pyramids of smaller size. The pyramid at Cholula covers an area of 45 acres. It was terraced and built with 4 stages. When measured by Humboldt, it was 1,400 feet square at the base and 160 feet high. At present, it is a ruin, and to superficial observers, at present, it is a ruin, and to superficial observers seems little more than a huge artificial mound of earth. Its condition of decay indicates that it is much older than even the Toltec period. The largest structure at Teotihuacan covers 11 acres. Those structures, these structures, these structures and the Mexican teocallis were made of earth. These structures and the Mexican teocallis generally were made of earth and faced with brick or stone. Captain Dupay saw, not far from Antiquera, I wonder if I checked that one. Antiquera. Let me just double check that. Antiquera. 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 Captain Dupay. Captain Dupay saw, not far from Antiquera, 2 truncated pyramids which were penetrated by 2 carefully constructed galleries. A gallery lined with hewn stone bearing sculptured decorations went through one of them. A similar gallery went partly through the other, and two branches were extended at right angles still farther, but terminating within. He mentions also the ruins of elaborately decorated edifices which had stood on elevated terraces. At one place, he excavated a terraced mound and discovered burnt brick. And he describes two ancient bridges of the Lascalans. Tlascalans. I better double check that. It's been a long time since I've said that word. Tlascalans. I'm going to say Tlascalans. 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 Of the Lascalans. And he describes two ancient bridges. And he describes Tlascalans. Yeah, I thought so. And he describes two ancient bridges of the Tlascalans, both built of hewn stone laid in cement, one of them being 200 feet long and 36 wide. Obelisks or pillars 42 feet high stood at the corners of these bridges. Important remains of the ancient people exist in many other places, and thousands of other monuments unrecorded by the antiquaries invest every sierra and valley of Mexico with profound interest. At Papantla, Papantla, I better double check that. I have not seen that word before. Papantla is my guess. Papantla. I'll delete that quickly. Papantla. Yeah. All right. Back to there. Click on that. At Papantla, in the state of Veracruz, there is a very ancient pyramidal structure, somewhat peculiar in style and character. It is known that important ruins exist in the forests of Papantla and Mazantla, which have never been described. The remarkable pyramid at Papantla was examined and described by Humboldt. The only material employed in constructing it was hewn stone. The stone was prepared in immense blocks, which were laid in mortar. The pyramid was an exact square at the base, each side being 82 feet in length and the height of about 60 feet. The stones were admirably cut and polished, and the structure was remarkably symmetrical. 6 stages could be described. Discerned. 6 stages could be discerned by 6 stages could be discerned by Humboldt, and his account of it says, a 7th appears to be concealed by the vegetation which covers the sides of the pyramid. Excuse me, and just got to take a quick break and burp and get a drink. Check. A great flight of steps leads to the level summit, by the sides of which are smaller flights. The facing of the stones is decorated with hieroglyphics, in which serpents and crocodiles carved in relievo are visible. Each story contains a great number of square niches, symmetrically distributed. In the first story, there are 24 on each side, in the second, 20, and in the third, 16. There are 366 of these niches on the whole pyramid, and 12 in the stairs toward the east. The civilization of the Aztecs who built the old city of Mexico will be made a separate topic. But it may be said here that when they came into the Valley of Mexico, they were much less advanced in civilization than their predecessors. There is no reason whatever to doubt that they had always resided in the country as an obscure branch of the Aboriginal people. Some have assumed, without much warrant, that they came to Mexico from the north. Mr. Squire shows, with much probability, that they came from the southern part of the country, where communities are still found speaking the Aztec language. When they rose to supremacy, they adopted, so far as their condition allowed, the superior knowledge of their predecessors and continued in a certain way and with a lower standard, the civilization of the Toltecs. It has been said, not without reason, that the civilization found in Mexico by the Spanish conquerors consisted, to a large extent, of fragments from the wreck that befell the American civilization of antiquity. The great ruins at the south. To find the chief seats and most abundant remains of the most remarkable civilization of this old American race, we must go still farther south into Central America and some of the more southern states of Mexico. Here, ruins of many ancient cities have been discovered, cities which must have been deserted and left to decay in ages previous to the beginning of the Aztec supremacy. Most of these ruins were found buried in dense forests, where, at the time of the Spanish conquest, they had been long hidden from observation. The ruins known as Palenque, for instance, seem to have been entirely unknown to both natives and Spaniards until about the year 1750. Cortez and some of his companions went through the open region near the forest in which these ruins are situated, without hearing of them or suspecting their existence. The great ruins known as Copan were in like manner unknown to the time of Cortez. To the time in to the time of Cortez. Check, check. The great ruins known as Copan were in like manner unknown in the time of Cortez. The Spaniards assaulted and captured a native town not far from the forest that covered them, but heard nothing of the ruins. The captured town, called Copan, afterward gave its name to the remains of this nameless ancient city, which were first discovered in 1576 and described by the Spanish licentiate. Licentiate? 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 Licensed. Licentiate. Oh, why did that go down? Okay, there we go. Thanks, Jason. Licentiate. Oh, that's a. I had that sentence. It's always at the end. It's always at the end. This is interesting. Licentiate. Palacios. Check. The captured town, called Copan, afterwards gave its name to the remains of this nameless ancient city, which were first discovered in 1576 and described by the Spanish licentiate Palacios. This was little more than 40 years after the native town was captured. But although Palacios tried in all possible ways to get from the older and more intelligent natives some account of the origin and history of the ruined city, they could tell him nothing about it. To them, the ruins were entirely mythical and mysterious. With the facts so accessible and the antiquity of the ruins so manifest, it is very singular that Mr. Stevens fell into the mistake of confounding this ruined city, situated in an old forest that was almost impenetrable, with the town captured by the Spaniards. The ruins here were discovered accidentally, and to approach them it was necessary, as at Palenque, to cut paths through the dense tropical undergrowth of the forest. To understand the situation of most of the old ruins in Central America, one must know something of the wild condition of the country. Mr. Squire says, by far the greater proportion of the country is in its primeval state and covered with dense, tangled, and almost impenetrable tropical forests, rendering fruitless all attempts at systematic investigation. There are vast tracts untrodden by human feet, or traversed only by the Indians who have a superstitious reverence for the moss-covered and crumbling monuments hidden in the depths of the wilderness. Asterisks. For these and other reasons, it will be long before the treasures of the past in Central America can become fully known. I can't believe that this was all talked about so openly back in the mid 1800s, and it's just getting to be the trendy narrative these days. A great forest of this character covers the southern half of Yucatan and extends far into Guatemala, which is half covered by it. It extends also into Chiapas and Tabasco and reaches into Honduras. The ruins known as Copan and Palenque are in this forest, not far from its southern edge. Its vast depths have never been much explored. There are ruins in it which none but wandering natives have ever seen, and some perhaps which no human foot has approached for ages. It is believed that ruins exist in nearly every part of this vast wilderness. According to the old Central American books and traditions, some of the principal seats of the earliest civilization, that of the Cohuas, did I check this one? Cohuas. Uh, Let me just double check this. Cohuas? I think it's Cohuas. Cohuas. And of course, it's quite a ways through the sentence. Cohuas. I should have known that. Nawas is spelled very similar. This is Cowas, just like the Nawa. Let me start from here. According to Cowas. According to the old Central American books and traditions, some of the principal seats of the earliest civilization, that of the Cowas, was in this forest covered region. In their time, the whole was cultivated and filled with inhabitants. Here was a populous and important part of the Colwa kingdom of Xibalba, which after a long existence was broken up by the Toltecs, and which had a relation in time to the Aztec dominion of Montezuma, much like that of the old monarchy of Egypt to the kingdom of the Ptolemies. In the time of the Spaniards, there was in the forest at Lake Poten a Peton, 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 Peton. In the time Peten. In the time of the Spaniards, there was in the forest at Lake Peten a solitary native town founded nearly a century previous to their time by a Maya prince of Itza, who with a portion of his people fled from Yucatan to that lonely region to escape from the disorder and bloodshed of a civil war. This was the civil war which destroyed Mayapan and broke up the Maya kingdom of Yucatan. In 1695, Don Martin Ursua, a Spanish official, let me do that again quickly. This was the civil war which destroyed Mayapan and broke up the Maya kingdom of Yucatan. Scroll up. In 1695, Don Martin Ursua, a Spanish In 1695, Don Martin Ursua, a Spanish official, built a road from Yucatan to Lake Peten, captured the town, and destroyed it. He reported that the builders of this road found evidence that wrecks of ancient cities lie buried in this wilderness. All along the route, they discovered vestiges of ruins, and special mention is made of remains of edifices on raised terraces, deserted and overgrown, and apparently very ancient. Character of the southern ruins. Should you visit the ruins of one of these mysterious old cities, you would see scattered over a large area great edifices in different stages of decay, which were erected on the level summits of low pyramidal mounds or platforms. The summits of these mounds are usually of sufficient extent to furnish space for extensive terraces or grounds, as well as room for the buildings. The edifices were built of hewn stone laid in a mortar of lime and sand, the masonry being admirable and the ornamentation in most cases very abundant. The pyramid foundations of earth were faced with hewn stone and provided with great stone stairways. These, we may suppose, were the most important buildings in the old city. The ordinary dwellings and all the other less important structures must have been made chiefly of wood or some other material which had perished entirely long ago and left no trace. For at present their remains are no more visible than those of the forest leaves which grew 500 years ago. One explorer of Palenque says, "For 5 days did I wander up and down among those crumbling monuments of a city which, I hazard little in saying, must have been one of the largest ever seen. There is, however, nothing to show us certainly the actual size of any of these ancient cities. It is manifest that some of them were very large, but as only the great structures made of stone remain to be examined, the actual extent of the areas covered by the other buildings cannot be determined." All right, here is the Arch of Lemonia. Very cool. Page 99. All right, let me just double check that. I just keep having to, I don't know why I keep worrying about that. The chief peculiarity of these ruins, that which especially invites attention, is the evidence they furnish that their builders had remarkable skill in architecture and architectural ornamentation. All who have visited them bear witness that the workmanship was of a high order. The rooms and corridors in these edifices were finely and often elaborately finished, plaster, stucco, and sculpture being used. In one room of a great building at Uzmal, Mr. Stevens says, "The walls were coated with a very fine plaster of Paris, equal to the best seen on walls in this country." Speaking of the construction of the edifice, he says, "Throughout, the laying and polishing of the stones are as perfect as under the rules of the best modern masonry. All the ruins explored have masonry of the same character. The floors, especially of the courts and corridors, were made sometimes of flat stones admirably wrought and finely polished, and sometimes of cement, which is now as hard as stone." Mr. Stevens, describing corridors of the palace at Palenque, says, "The floors are of cement as hard as the best seen in the remains of Roman baths and cisterns." We give two illustrations of their method of constructing the arch. Figure 25 shows an arch at Lemonia, at Uzmal. Figure 26 shows the most common form of the arch in the older ruins. The ornamentation is no less remarkable than the masonry and architectural finish. It is found on the walls within and without and appears in elaborate designs on the heavy cornices. The exterior ornamentation is generally carved or sculptured on the smooth surface of the stone and must have required a vast amount of time and labor as well as skillful. Right at the end. That's when it happens. Right at the end. The exterior ornament. Mind you, I did kind of mess up the beginning too. It just sounded like I had a tongue-tied moment there. So here's the common form of arch. Interesting. Okay, let me just go back to that one. The exterior ornamentation is generally carved or sculptured on the smooth surface of the stone and must have required a vast amount of time and labor, as well as skillful artists. In some of the ruins, inscriptions are abundant, being found on walls, tablets, and pillars. The general effect of the exterior decoration is thus described by Mr. Stevens in the account of his first view of the ruins at Palenque. "We saw before us a large building richly ornamented with stuccoed figures on pilasters, curious and elegant, trees growing close to it and their branches entering the doors, the style and effect of structure and ornament unique, extraordinary, and mournfully beautiful." In a description of the walls around an interior court of the building at Uzmal, we have this tribute to the artistic skill of the decorators. "It would be difficult, in arranging four sides facing a courtyard, to have more variety and at the same time more harmony of ornament. In some of the ruins, and especially at Copan, there are clusters of four-sided stone pillars or obelisks varying from 12 to over 20 feet high. These are elaborately sculptured and show human figures, ornamental designs, and many inscriptions. One or two statues have been discovered, and a statuette 12 inches high is described. It is made of baked clay, very hard, and the surface is smooth as if coated with enamel. At Palenque are remains of a well built aqueduct, and near the ruins, especially in Yucatan, are frequently found the remains of many finely constructed aqueducts or artificial lakes. The bottoms of these lakes were made of flat stones laid in cement, several layers deep. In Yucatan, trees of a very ancient paved traces, not trees, traces. In Yucatan. I was just wondering about these ancient roads. In Yucatan, traces of a very ancient paved road have been found. This road ran north and south and probably led to cities in the region now covered by the Great Wilderness. It was raised above the graded level of the ground and made very smooth. These antiquities show that the section of the continent was anciently occupied by a people admirably skilled in the arts of masonry, building, and architectural decoration. Some of their works cannot be excelled by the best of art constructors and decorators. They were highly skilled also in the appliances of civilized life, and they had the art of writing, a fact placed beyond dispute by their many inscriptions. A more particular account of some of these ruins will be given in the next chapter. Among the more important works relating to them are those of Stevens and Catherwood, some of the volumes of Mr. Squire, Frederick Waldick's work, and a recent French volume by Desiree Charnay, which is accompanied by a folio volume of photographs. Palacios, who described Copan in 1576, may properly be called the first explorer. A brief account of Palenque was prepared by Captain Del Rio in 1787 and published in 1822. Ah, I'm going to redo that. Damn it. Excuse my language. Sorry. A brief account. Check. A brief account of Palenque was prepared by Captain Del Rio and it. A brief account of Palenque was prepared by Captain Del Rio in 1787 and published in 1822. Captain Dupay's folios in French with the drawings of Castaneda contain the first really important memoir of these ruins. It was prepared in 1807, detained in Mexico during the Mexican Revolution, and finally published at Paris in 1834-35. The volumes of Brasseur de Bourbourg are valuable. They relate chiefly to matters not always understood and seldom discussed with care by those who merely visit and describe the monuments, such as the writing, books, and traditions of the ancient Mexican and Central American people. His style is diffuse, sometimes confused, and rather tedious, and some of his theories are very fanciful. But he has discovered the key to the Maya alphabet and translated one of the old Central American books. No careful student of American archaeology can afford to neglect what he has written on this subject. Let me just double check something here. That's a good chapter. I like that. How far does the other one go? I'm just double checking if I should keep going here or keep going for a bit, maybe. Whence this civilization came. This goes to 144, and I was starting at 76. So I'm gonna just save this. I'm gonna stop sharing this for a sec, and I'm gonna just save this and continue on for a little bit. But I decided to save the chapters separately, like I usually do, because it's really a pain to go in later and split them up. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but okay. So where am I? What book is this? This is Ancient America, chapter 4. And I don't know why this is not. They didn't even say this. This next chapter coming up is continued. It's just chapter 5, Mexico and Central America. So it's just a new chapter of the same description. Let's see here. It's taking a while. Okay, there it goes. I'm just going to double check it. I have a paranoia about these things not saving properly, so I'm just going to go in and double check that it's there before I close it off. Okay, I'm going to close it down and restart a new one and share the screen again. And let's just keep going for a little bit. Entire screen over there. There it is. Check, check, check. It's working fine. Okay. I'm finding this fascinating that they knew so much back then about all these unexplored cities, and really not much has happened. Like now we're just realizing how bad it is, and now we're doing lidar and all kinds of stuff. When meanwhile they knew about all these things 150 years ago. Chapter 5: Mexico and Central America. To understand the situation and historical significance of the more important antiquities in southern Mexico and Central America, we must keep in view their situation relative to the great unexplored forest to which attention has been called. Examine carefully any good map of Mexico and Central America, and consider well that the ruins already explored or visited are wholly in the northern half of Yucatan, or far away from this region at the south, beyond the Great Wilderness, or in the southern edge of it. Uxmal, Mayapan, Chichen Itza, and many others are in Yucatan. Palenque, Copan, and others are in the southern part of the wilderness, in Chiapas, Honduras, and Guatemala. Mr. Squire visited ruins much farther south in San Salvador and in the western parts of Nicaragua and Costa Rica. You know, I'm such a geek for maps. I mean, I shouldn't even interrupt this whole thing, but I mean, I really just feel like going there and seeing where we're talking about. So he's saying like there's Chiapas, Tabasco, the Yucatan, Nicaragua. So now we're getting into Central America. Copan, is that Copan? That's probably not Copan. That's Coban. It's probably different. Oh, there's Palenque right there. So I think like there's just all this like this is where people are just exploring now, even still. I think it's in mainly in Mexico, but also obviously other areas down there. But I just have to see that visual. I'm gonna stop. Close that down, I guess. There we go. Scroll. Pull that down. And in the western parts of Nicaragua. Okay. There we go. The vast forest, which is spread over the northern half of Guatemala and the southern half of Yucatan and extended into the other states, covers an area considerably larger in extent than Ohio or Pennsylvania. Oh, no. What happened there? The vast forest, which is spread over the northern half of Guatemala and the southern half of Yucatan and extended into other states, covers an area considerably larger in extent than Ohio or Pennsylvania. Does its position relative to the known ruins afford no suggestion concerning the ancient history of this forest covered region? It is manifest that in the remote ages when the older of the cities and now in ruins, it is. Let me redo that guy quickly. It is manifest that in the remote ages when the older of the cities now in ruins were built, this region was a populous and important part of the country. And this is shown also by the antiquities found wherever it has been penetrated by explorers who knew how to make discoveries, as well as by the old books and traditions. Therefore, it is not unreasonable to assume that Copan and Palenque are specimens of great ruins that lie buried in it, the ruins of which something is known to have merely been visited, described in part by explorers, some of whom brought away drawings of the principal objects. In giving a brief account of the more important ruins, I will begin with the old city of which most has been heard, Palenque. No one can tell the true name of the ancient city now called Palenque. It is known to us by this name because the ruins are situated a few miles distance from the town of Palenque, now a village, but formerly a place of some importance. The ruins are in the northern part of the Mexican state of Chiapas, hidden out of sight in the forest, where they seem to have been forgotten long before the time of Cortez. More than 200 years passed after the arrival of the Spaniards before their existence became known to Europeans. They were discovered about the year 1750. Since that year, decay has. I thought that was going to be a person. Since that year, decay has made some progress in them. Captain Del Rio, who visited and described them in 1787, examined 14 edifices admirably built of hewn stone and estimated the extent of the ruins to be 7 or 8 leagues one way. Chemas. Along the river Chemas, and half a league the other. He mentions a subterranean aqueduct of great solidity and durability, which passes under the largest building. Other explorers have since visited Palenque and reported on the ruins by pen and pencil, but it is not certain that all the ruined edifices belonging to them have been seen, nor that the explorations have made it possible to determine the ancient extent of the city with any approach to accuracy. The very great difficulties which obstruct all attempts at complete exploration have not allowed any explorer to say he has examined or discovered all the moldering monuments hidden in the dense and tangled forest, even within the space allowed by Del Rio's half league from the river, not to speak of what may lie buried and unknown in the dense mass of trees and undergrowth beyond this limit. The largest known building at Palenque is called the Palace. It stands near the river on a terraced pyramidal foundation, 40 feet high and 310 feet long by 260 broad at the base. The edifice itself is 220 feet long, 100 feet wide, and 25 feet high. It faces the east and has 14 doorways on each side, with 11 at the ends. It was built entirely of hewn stone, laid with admirable precision in mortar, which seems to have been of the best quality. A corridor 9 feet wide and roofed by a pointed arch went round the building on the outside, and this was separated from another within of equal width. The palace has 4 interior courts, the largest being 70 by 80 feet in extent. These are surrounded by corridors, and the architectural work facing them is richly decorated. Within the building were many rooms. From the north of the side, within the building, excuse me. Within the building were many rooms. From the north side of one of the smaller courts rises a high tower, or pagoda-like structure, 30 feet square at the base, which goes up far above the highest elevation of the building and seems to have been still higher when the whole structure was in perfect condition. The great rectangular mound used for the foundation was cased with hewn stone, the workmanship here and everywhere else throughout the structure being very superior. The piers around the courts are covered with figures in stucco or plaster, which were broken. Excuse me. I gotta redo that. Where broken. Not were broken, where broken. The piers around the courts are covered with figures in stucco or plaster, which, where broken, reveals 6 or more coats or layers, each revealing traces of painting. This indicates that the building has been used so long before it was deserted that the plastering needed to be many times renewed. There is some evidence that painting was used as a means of decoration, But that which most engages attention is the heuristic management artistic. Heuristic? But that which most engages attention is the artistic management of the stonework and, above all, the beautifully executed sculptures for ornamentation. Two other buildings at Palenque, marked by Mr. Stevens in his plan of the ruins as Casa Number 1 and Casa Number 2, views of which are shown in figures 27 and 28, are smaller, but in some respects still more remarkable. The first of these, 75 feet long by 25 feet wide, stands on the summit of a high truncated pyramid and has solid walls on all sides save the north, where there are 5 doorways. Within are a corridor and 3 rooms. Between the doorways leading from the corridors to these rooms are great tablets, each 13 feet long and 8 feet high, and all covered with elegantly carved inscriptions. And here is that looks like a plan view. So from up top, Casa Number 1, Palenque from front. Yeah, there's the front, and there's the ground view, the ground plan from up top. Interesting. Runes and rooms. A similar but smaller tablet covered with an inscription appears on the wall of the central room. Casa Number 2 consists of a steep and lofty truncated pyramid which stands on a terraced foundation and has its level summit crowned with a building 50 feet long by 31 wide, which has 3 doorways at the south and within a corridor and 3 rooms. This edifice, sometimes called La Cruz, has, above the height required for the rooms, what is described as 2 stories of interlaced stucco work resembling a high, fanciful lattice. Here, too, inscribed tablets appear on the walls, but the inscriptions which are abundant at Palenque are by no means confined to tablets. Here's the next picture, same thing, front view and ground plan right here. Tablet, altar, outer corridor. Check, check. As to the ornamentation, the walls, piers, and cornices are covered with it. Everywhere the masterly workmanship and artistic skill of the old constructors compel admiration. Mr. Stevens going in so Mr. Stevens. Mr. Stevens going so far as to say of sculptured human figures found in fragments, in justness of proportion and symmetry, they must have approached the Greek models. Casa Number 2 of Mr. Stevens is usually called La Cruz because the most prominent object within the building is a great bas relief on which are sculptured a cross and several human figures. This building stands on the high pyramid and is approached by a flight of steps. Dupay says it is impossible to describe adequately the interior decorations of this sumptuous temple. The cross is supposed to have been the central object of interest. It was wonderfully sculptured and decorated. Human figures stand near it, and some grave ceremony seems to be represented. The infant held toward the cross by one of the figures suggests a christening ceremony. The cross is one of the most common emblems present in all the ruins. This led the Catholic missionaries to assume that knowledge of Christianity had been brought to that part of America long before their arrival, and they adopted the belief that the gospel was preached there by St. Thomas. This furnished excellent material for the hagiologists of that age, but like everything else peculiar to these monkish romancers, it betrayed great lack of knowledge. The cross, even the so-called Latin cross, is not exclusively a Christian emblem. It was used in the Oriental world many centuries, perhaps millenniums, before the Christian era. It was a religious emblem of the Phoenicians, associated with Astarte, who is usually figured bearing what is called a Latin cross. She is seen so figured on Phoenician coin. The cross is found in the ruins of Nineveh. Mr. Layard, describing one of the finest specimens of Assyrian sculpture, the figure of an early Nimrod king, he calls it, says, Round his neck are hung the four sacred signs: the crescent, the star or sun, the trident, and the cross. These signs, the cross included, appear suspended from the necks or collars of Oriental prisoners, figured on Egyptian monuments known to be 1,500 years older than the Christian era. The cross was a common emblem in ancient Egypt, and the Latin form of it was used in the religious mysteries of that country in connection with a monogram of the moon. It was to degrade this religious emblem of the Phoenicians that Alexander ordered the execution of 2,000 principal citizens of Tyre by crucifixion. The cross as an emblem is very common among the antiquities of Western Europe, where archaeological investigation has sometimes been embarrassed and confused by the assumption that any old monument bearing the figure of a cross cannot be as old as Christianity. What more will be found at Palenque when the whole field of its ruin has been explored cannot new now be reported. What more? Okay. What more will be found at Palenque when the whole field of its ruins has been explored cannot now be reported. The chief difficulty by which explorers are embarrassed is manifest in the statement of Mr. Stevens. Without a guide, we might have gone within 100 feet of the buildings without discovering one of them. More has been discovered than I have mentioned. That's pretty interesting. More has. I wonder how long it takes to overgrow that much. More has been discovered there than I have mentioned, my purpose being to give an accurate view of the style, finish, decoration, and general character of the architecture and artistic work found in the ruins, rather than a complete account of everything connecting with them. The ruins of Palenque are deemed important by archaeologists, partly on account of the great abundance of inscriptions found there, which it is believed will at length be deciphered, the written characters being similar to those of the Mayas, which are now understood. Whoops, Quirigua, Quirigua. Let me just double check that. Quirigua, 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 Quirigua. Go back to that. Copan and Quiragua. The ruins known as Copan are situated in the extreme western part of Honduras, where they are densely covered by the forest. As already stated, they were first discovered by Europeans about 40 years after the War of Conquest swept through that part of the country, and were at that time wholly mysterious to the natives. The monuments seemed older than those at Palenque, but we have only scant descriptions of them. They are situated in a wild and solitary part of the country where the natives see as little of strangers as the Arabs about Mount Sinai and are more suspicious. For this reason, they have not been very carefully explored. It is known that these ruins extend 2 or 3 miles. It is known that these ruins extend 2 or 3 miles along the left bank of the river Copan. Not much has been done to discover how far they extend from the river into the forest. Mr. Stevens describes as follows his first view of them. We came to the right bank of the river and saw directly opposite a stone wall from 60 to 90 feet high, with firs growing out of the top, running north and south along the river 624 feet, in some places fallen, in others entire. This great wall supported the rear side of the elevated foundation of a great edifice. It was made of cut stone, well laid in mortar or cement, the blocks of stone being 6 feet long. Figure 29 shows the wall somewhat imperfectly. He saw next a square stone column standing by itself 14 feet high and 3 feet on each side. From top to bottom, it was richly ornamented with sculptured designs on two opposite sides, the other sides being covered with inscriptions finely carved on the stone. And here it is right there. Kind of hard to see, but pretty interesting. Yeah. Hmm. On the front face, surrounded by the sculptured ornaments, was the figure of a man. 14 other obelisks of the same kind were seen, some of them being higher than this. Some of them had fallen. These sculptured and inscribed pillars constitute the chief peculiarity of Copan. Mr. Squire says of them, the ruins of Copan and the corresponding monuments which I examined in the valley of the Camilican. Is that really how it says? Should I double check that? Damn, I don't think I saw that one. Camilican, I think it's Camilican. Camilican. You previously, I previously asked about what? I did previously ask about that one. I've caught these guys. I've caught my assistant giving me different descriptions. Camelicon. Camelicon. Okay, what did he say this time? Camelicon. He got it right the same. That's good. The ruins of Copan and I asked my assistant, why did you tell me it was pronounced this way before? Now you're changing your mind. Oh, sorry about that. The ruins of Copan and the corresponding monuments which I examined in the valley of Camilican are distinguished by singular and elaborately carved monoliths, which seem to have been replaced at Palenque by equally elaborate basso relievos belonging, it would seem, to a later and more advanced period of art. The great building first noticed stands or stood on a pyramidal foundation, which is supported along the river by that high back wall. The structure extends 624 feet on the river line. Mr. Stevens described it as an oblong enclosure and states that it was Mr. Stevens described it as an oblong enclosure and states that it has a wide terrace nearly 100 feet above the river on which great trees are growing, some of them more than 20 feet in circumference. Here, as at Palenque, the ornamentation was rich and abundant. The ruins, greatly worn by decay, still show that architecture, sculpture, painting, and all the arts that embellish life had flourished in this overgrown forest. Some beautifully check. Some beautifully executed sculptures were found buried in the earth, and there can be no doubt that extensive excavation, if it were possible in that almost invincible forest, would lead to important and valuable discoveries. Besides the great, oh, excuse me, check. Besides the great building and the monoliths, several pyramidal structures are mentioned by Mr. Stevens, who points out that extensive exploration is impossible unless one shall first clear away the forest and burn up the trees. Palacios, who described the ruined city nearly 300 years ago, saw much more than Mr. Stevens. He described the ruins of superb edifices built of hewn stone, which manifestly belonged to a large city. He mentions in connection with the Great Wall an enormous eagle carved in stone, which bore a square shield on its breast, covered with undecipherable characters. He mentions also a stone giant and a stone cross with one arm broken. He saw a plaza, circular in form, surrounded by ranges of steps or seats, which reminded him of the Colosseum at Rome. As many as 80 ranges still remaining in some places. This plaza was paved with beautiful stones, all square and well worked. 6 of the great obelisks, which he described as statues, stood in this enclosure, and in its center was a great stone basin. A history of Guatemala by a writer named, what is that? I? Iiwaros. A history of Guatemala by a writer named Hueros. Maybe is that an H? Hueros. The term Waros. Huh. Just give me a sec here. I gotta double check this. So is that an H or is that two I's? Okay, I'm just gonna go Waros. Basin. A history of Guatemala by a writer named Hueros states that the Circus of Copan, as he calls the plaza described by Palacios, was still entire in the year 1700. He mentions gateways which led into the enclosure and says it was surrounded on the outside by stone pyramids 6 yards high, near which were standing sculptured figures or obelisks. No doubt remains of this remarkable circus would be found now if the forest should be removed. What else could be found there by means of careful and thorough exploration may never be known, for the region is uninviting, the forest very difficult, and such an exploration would require much more than the means and efforts of one or two individuals. Not very far away in the neighboring state of Guatemala, on the right bank of the river Montagua, to which the Copan is a tributary, are the ruins called Quirigua. Quirigua. What did I say that was again? I thought that was at the beginning of the chapter. Quirigua. To which the Copan is a tributary are the ruins called Quirigua. Quirigua. Not very far. Quirigua. Quirigua. Not very far away in the neighboring state of Guatemala, on the right bank of the river Montagua, to which the Copan is a tributary, are the ruins called Quirigua. It is manifest that a great city once stood here. These ruins have a close resemblance to those at Copan, but they appear to be much older, for they have, to a great extent, become little more than heaps of rubbish. All right, let's turn this page around, take a quick boo. Ruins at Mitla. Oh, that's a beautiful picture. I have to recenter this whole thing, I think, right? Like last time. Recenter it. I'm going to finish here in this at the end of this chapter, though, at Mitla. Are visible. Doubtless important relics. Okay, I'm going to just finish off here. Let's see here. Check. Doubtless important relics of the old city are now more abundant below the surface than above it. Mr. Stevens described. Doubtless important relics of the old city are now more abundant below the surface than above it. Mr. Stevens, describing what he saw there, confines his attention chiefly to a pyramidal structure with flights of steps and monoliths larger and higher than those at Copan, but otherwise similar. He states, however, that while they have the same general style, the sculptures are in lower relief and hardly so rich in design. One of the obelisks here is 20 feet high, 5 feet 6 inches wide, and 2 feet 8 inches thick. The chief figures carved on it are that of a man on the front and that of a woman on the back. The sides are covered with inscriptions similar in appearance to those at Copan. Some of the other standing obelisks are higher than this. It seems reasonable to infer that the structures at Quirigua, Quirigua, Quirigua. I shouldn't have rushed that last sentence there, but I did. The sides are covered with some of the check. Some of the other standing obelisks are higher than this. It seems reasonable to infer that the structures at Quirigua were more ancient than those at Copan. All right, that's where I'm going to finish. Halfway through that chapter, I'll finish off that chapter probably Monday. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for watching. And yeah, check out the live tab, like and subscribe, and all that good stuff. Pass our stuff around. We really do this for a living now, trying to make a living out of it. It's pretty difficult, but our stuff's on Audible and Spotify as well, and this channel that you can share around. Thank you very much for being here for this experimental live read. We're almost halfway through the book already, so I'll keep doing this book anyways with the visual pictures and stuff. And have a good weekend. Love you.